Hey, what's up? My name's JM Chaley and welcome to my channel. This week I want to talk about deconstruction of stories, story deconstruction. This concept is nothing new. It's out there, and I watched a couple of videos on it and I thought it was really interesting. It's the idea of taking a book within your own genre and deconstructing it, seeing how it all kind of comes together. What did this author do? What are the story beats that they followed? How did they unfold their story in the three-act structure? And then you take another book in the same genre and say, well, how did this author do it? And then how did this author do it? You kind of look and see, what are the commonalities here? Is there something I can glean from this that is a bit of a recipe that I can follow? And you'll find a lot of things, I think, that align with things like story genius, right? And saves the cat writes a novel. Like all these kind of like the story beats. These things are true story realities, right? Like no one's reinventing the wheel here. But deconstructing helps you see how other authors have followed these known writing methods. And maybe you can see what they did and apply those same lessons to you. So there's tons and tons of videos about this topic, deconstruction, tons of videos out there. And if you know my channel, I don't really do a lot of videos about things that, at least I'm aware, that there's a ton of stuff. Like if someone has an awesome video on deconstructing videos, I'm not going to regurgitate that stuff on my channel. What I will do is take my own approach to it and maybe present my own slant. And that's what I'm going to do here. So what I want to focus on is specifically the first chapter. I'm going to use this as an example. You can deconstruct the entire book. But I thought that first chapter was so important because that's where you grab your reader and hopefully hook your reader and keep them moving on to chapter 2. Of course, my genre is urban fantasy. I've got The Unlife of Lisa Cooper and The Vampires of 1863. Even though The Vampires of 1863 is historical, it's still considered an urban fantasy. It just takes place in the 19th century. So I was targeting urban fantasy books to deconstruct. And specifically, I'm looking at the very first chapter for this exercise. And specifically, the very first sentence. Now, I know a lot of people put a lot of weight into that first sentence. Oh, there's so much pressure around that first sentence and meh. And yes, you could have a very powerful first sentence that hooks people. And wouldn't that be wonderful? But I wouldn't put so much weight on your shoulders to do that. I've read a lot of books that I love so very much, and I can't recall the first sentences of any of them except for a very, very few. Right? Very, very few. And a lot of my favorite books, when I made this video, when I did the research for this video, I had to go back and look and say, what was the first sentence of this book? And these are books that I love very, very much. And I don't remember their first sentence. So I'm going to read some of these because I'm not going to know them by heart, because I don't know them by heart. But we're going to start with The Iron Druid Chronicles, the very first book, which was Hounded by Kevin Hearn. Now, this book, if you follow my channel, if you know, this series really got me off my butt and started writing because that's the book that clicked for me. You know, I think a lot of authors may have a book that they read that it made that click and said, I want to write a book. This was mine, right? And it started with Hounded. Chapter 1 is 7 pages long. I'm talking about a trade paperback now, so it's like, what, 6x9 inches, right? So 7 pages. It's not terribly long. And the first sentence is there are many perks to living 21 centuries, and foremost among them is bearing witness to the rare birth of genius. So what does that tell us about the very first century? Right off the bat, you know that the main character is over 2,000 years old. In chapter 1, he kind of goes into the people that he's met through his centuries. And even though the fact that he looks like he's 21 years old, he's met, I forget all the people he's met, but like Shakespeare and all these other people that he's met over the years, right? You find out that he's Irish, he runs an occult bookstore, he lives in Arizona, so you find out about where he's at, what he does. He's got these tattoos. He talks about how his age and his weirdness can kind of clash with the modern world. He mentions that he knows Coyote, the god Coyote, and other gods. He talks about the She and the Tuatha De Danann. So in this first chapter, you're getting a little bit of world building, right? All this kind of stuff. And he establishes his problem, that the gods are looking for him. I don't want to give spoily stuff here, but he's got some gods that are hunting him down. Not a good deal. He gets jumped by 5 Fae, and there's a fight. So there's like 2 pages of the 7-page chapter is a fight. That's pretty cool. He establishes that he is the Iron Druid, and if you know, Iron and Fae don't go well together, right? You see him heal himself by touching the earth, and you get a little bit of dialogue because he's talking to his attackers. So you get a little, once you get dialogue, you get a little bit of his attitude, his personality comes through. You reveal the enemy. You get the name of the god that's chasing him down. If you're familiar with the series, you still don't know about why the gods are chasing him. That hasn't been revealed yet. You haven't met Oberon, and Oberon is like his dog companion. We haven't met any of the Tuatha De Danann, which are the Irish gods, and we get some stakes. In that very first chapter, we get some stakes. Atticus is being hunted. The main character is being hunted. So in that very first paragraph, we understand who he is, what his powers are, and what his problem is. So it's a strong first chapter right out of the gate. Okay. Next example is Mercy Thompson series, Moon Called. That's book 1 of the Mercy Thompson series, Moon Called. This is 18 pages. I want to say this was a mass market though, so it's a smaller book. So the trade paperback is, if it's going to be, the book was wider and longer, it would be less pages. So the first sentence is, I didn't realize he was a werewolf at first. So right off the bat, you know that the main character at least is someone supernatural who's aware of werewolves. So I'm not going to go into all of these. The first one I kind of gave an example of how I broke down the chapter and what was kind of revealed. But, within the first few paragraphs, that the main character has a heightened sense of smell, and she's a mechanic, right? She knows about werewolves and stuff. You learn about Adam, who's her neighbor. He's a very important werewolf character. She's aware that he's a werewolf. She's not a werewolf. She's a coyote walker. And that's different than a were or a lycanthrope. So you learn a little bit about that. You learn about this guy Z, who works at the mechanic shop with her. And he's a fae, right? So you learn all about this kind of stuff. The world is being built, and you really get a taste for all the supernatural stuff that's going on in the world. So takeaways from this. This chapter was pretty long. The inciting incident is early, but we don't really get an immediate pull on that, or the stakes. She meets a werewolf. That's kind of a big deal. but there's no immediate danger to her or stakes that are saying, uh-oh, Mercy's in danger. You don't really get that in chapter 1. There's some problems and inconvenience, but no real like, ooh, yeah, you're in trouble now. Remember, your inciting incident does not have to hit in chapter 1. It should be within your first 3 chapters. So the stakes don't necessarily need to hit immediately. They probably need to follow your inciting incident. So even though she meets the werewolf on the very first line, I wouldn't say that's her inciting incident. It's not. You have to read the book to find out more. Once you get your inciting incident, that's when your stakes go up. That's when the problem hits. Now, typically, your chapter 1 is your glimpse into what your character's normal life looks like. And for the Iron Druid, that's probably what his normal life looks like. Hey, he gets occasionally jumped by Fae. You know, right? Mercy Thompson, yeah, she knows werewolves. You know, she sees them. You know, that's normal for her. She works with a Fae. That's normal for her. The reader's seeing it for the first time, but this is normal for her. Okay. Third example, last example, the Hollow series, Dead Witch Walking. This is by Kim Harrison. Chapter 1, this is Dead Witch Walking, 22 pages. And again, this is a mass market paperback, so it would probably be, you know, if it was trade paperback, it would probably be less pages. The wider and longer the book dimensions. So the first sentence is, I stood in the shadows of a deserted bookshop front, a deserted bookshop front across from the Blood and Brew pub, trying not to be obvious as I tugged my black leather pants back up where they belong. You don't get a lot of insight into this sentence as to who and what she is, but that Blood and Brew pub is a little bit of a nod to the supernatural, right? Witchiness and all this kind of stuff. You know the title of the book is Dead Witch Walking. First sentence, she hands you Blood and Brew pub. I mean, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes if you're the reader of this book to start putting things together. So it's a great first sentence where she's giving you a little taste of what this book is going to have for you. Just like the other 2 examples where I'm 2100 years old or I found a werewolf. This is another example of a first sentence that gives you a little bit of that setting right out of the gate, which I think is great. In the very first sentence, you learn that Rachel Morgan is an agent who hunts down witches that break the law, and she's got this ID card, so she's like a licensed person. You find out that these people are known, like the federal government actually knows about them. So imagine it's like the X-Files, and if it's some weird supernatural stuff, the feds actually go to these agents that take care of preternatural things. And we learn that, you know, werewolves and vampires exist in this world. There's a little bit of a fight, but really what this is that the chapter is long. We get no inciting incident yet. This is the view of her life, right? She's on the case. She's looking to solve track some witch down, I think. There's no team up with Ivy yet because we meet Ivy the vampire, so we know that Ivy is around. Chapter 1 was solid. It established the normal life of Rachel, but there was no stakes yet, no danger. That's okay. Chapter 1 isn't necessarily going to deliver the inciting incident at that time. So I noticed 3 things that these books kind of had in common. Many of them had the first sentence that hinted at the setting of what the character, what the setting was, or what the character is. So they give you that right off the bat. Right in that first sentence, you get a taste of the character or the setting. That's in line with, you know, the title of the book or the little blurb you read in the back. There's a nod to that. Many of them dedicate the whole chapter without any inciting incident or stating a problem, but many of them also know that there's a problem without the stakes going up. So it's not hard and fast rule to when to introduce your inciting incident. Sorry I'm reading off my notes here, but this is like this deconstruction that I did with all this analysis that I wrote down. World building introduced as the character is followed through their world or daily routine, which is what you want to do. So, I mean, as I'm giving these examples, it sounds like there's not a lot of dialogue and not a lot of, there's not a lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of like dumping of information. And that's kind of true, but it's being shown the way it should be as you're going through, like you're following Mercy Thompson's day and she's describing things as she's encountering them. So it's all very organic and unfolding properly, right? So going back to that first line, I want to talk about first lines of books and how they can have this sort of echo of the title and the blurb and the theme and all the kind of things that you expect the book to contain, given a nod by the first sentence. So I'll give some more examples. These are just first sentences of books, okay? Jaws, the first sentence. The great fish moved silently through the water. Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, right? Cujo. Once upon a time. Yes. Stephen King started a book with Once Upon a Time. Once upon a time, not so long ago, a monster came to the small town of Castle Rock, Maine. But there are exceptions. Okay, I'm talking about urban fantasy, and a big name in the urban fantasy genre is the Dresden Files. The very first book in the Dresden series is Stormfront. And the first sentence of Stormfront is, "The mailman walked toward my office door, half an hour earlier than usual." That's it. That's it. That's all you get. You're thinking, oh my goodness. So I don't want to misdirect anybody with all these examples of first sentences that carry this weight of the theme of the story or hint at who the main character is. And those are all great examples of first sentences. But look at Harry Dresden, one of the largest names by Jim Butcher. This series is one of the biggest urban fantasy series out there. The mailman walked towards my office door half an hour earlier than usual. You get nothing there's no indication that Harry Dresden is a wizard. You don't know anything about a problem that he has, anything about the setting. There's nothing supernatural hinted at and in this sentence. But it's not a bad first sentence. Immediately after you realize the subsequent sentences that follow, you realize why this mailman is earlier than normal, because he's a new guy. And you get this whole exchange where he's looking at Harry Dresden's office door, because he's a private investigator. He's got one of those glass with the letters on the thing, right? And it says Harry Dresden Wizard on the front of the door. And the mailman's like, "What, are you kidding me?" Right? So you don't get it immediately in that first sentence. But in that first couple of paragraphs, it's all there. It's all there. The first sentence just sort of opens the door to this lovely exchange where you get a lot of world building, and there's dialogue in there and everything like that, where they're getting kind of snarky with each other, and it's a great opening to this book. So that about wraps it up. What's the takeaway from all this? You're going to have to do some deconstruction research yourself if you're interested in taking this direction, but there are no hard and fast rules. Look at the difference between what I showed you in Harry Dresden versus, say, the Iron Druid. Iron Druid comes out of the gate saying, "Hey, I'm 2100 years old." And Dresden's like, "Hey, my mailman came early today." It's okay. You don't have to follow all these sort of rules. There are no rules, really. These are just suggestions. You can look at these things and say, is this right for me? Do I want to go in this direction? And you can make an educated guess by deconstructing more books. The more books you deconstruct, the more wide your vision becomes. All right, so that about wraps it up. Deconstructing books, taking a look at that very first paragraph, that very first sentence in books within your own genre. If you like this video, please smush that like button. And as always, please subscribe. I post most Thursdays. And you can follow me on social media. I am available on a plethora of platforms. I'm most active on Facebook and Threads. Check out jmchaley.com if you want to check out my books. Character art, leave me a message. Please check out The Unlife of Lisa Cooper and The Vampires of 1863 for some cool vampire action. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.